Well, today I'm joined by Simon Kaye from Deepweaver AI. Simon, say hello to the audience and how is your day going?
Well, hi everybody. Day's good. Very windy here in Melbourne, so not unlike most days. But yeah, it's going to be fun.
Right, you ready to answer all things AI guardrails then?
Sounds like a shakedown, but yeah, look, happy to give a perspective and get people thinking.
So recently, there were some voluntary guardrails introduced. Tell us a little bit about which particular Australian authority has. Just give us a brief introduction to these voluntary guardrails.
Yeah, so it's very interesting when you look at what the Australian government and entities have done around um, sort of taking that global view and sort of the National AI Centre associated with CSIRO and a whole lot of organisations have penned down these sort of voluntary guardrails. Uh, the, the thing with it is it's an evolving space. It's an evolving document. So they're never meant to be, these are the 10, and everybody has to kind of form up against those 10. Um, so for me, I look at what's happening at a global level in Europe, North America, where we take most of our inspiration from. And I look at what we're doing here locally, and I think these are going to fast become from voluntary to mandatory to legislative, right? Um, and we're just at that point where it's evolving. And the good thing about the way the Australian government has treated this is it's quite collaborative, right? Collaborative with industry, collaborative with business stakeholders. So it's not there to slow things down, but it's definitely there um, to give people an insight as to what they need to start thinking about for the future, because these will become legislated at some
Okay.
point.
And so to kind of dive into them, the first one talks about robust and responsible testing of AI systems. What does that actually look like? And uh, is it a realistic expectation for every AI developer from big tech company to a small startup to actually have robust and responsible testing in place?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because what we don't want to do at this point in time is to create two streams, the haves and the have-nots. Right. And the reality is companies, tech companies, big banks, all of those with a large war chest of money can meet best practices and even help set best practices. But if that watermark is too high for startups or smaller organizations, it tends to be very challenging, right? The thing is, anyone can become a creator in this AI space. So we used to do functionality testing, we used to do user testing, and we used to work with large pieces of enterprise software. There was a confidence knowing you were using something provided by somebody, an ERP application or whatever, that some of this had already been done for you. But in this world where everybody's a potential creator, the watermark has to be at a level where everybody can achieve it. But this have and have not concept, we may end up for a period of time in a two-tiered model. Um, if you look at what some of our large banks in Australia are announcing, big partnerships with big AI organizations, well, you're not going to see that from a fintech or insurance company. But what the hope is that there's a level of sharing, not from a competitive nature, but a level of sharing in a sense of the frameworks and how things are done and the openness in this world, the AI world, that mean that even if you have a deficit in resources or expertise, you see the evolution of organizations like Deepweaver coming in to fill that space, right? You also see larger tech companies building practices to kind of fill that space. So it's sort of recognized that we don't want the two speed model, but we may have it for a period of time just because of affordability, right? When you're trying to think about Functionality testing and security testing, we're all really good at. Bias testing, vulnerabilities, and unexpected behavior testing. They're new muscles for a lot of organizations.
So on that note around size of organization and essentially the fact that AI is essentially democratizing development, is there a threshold in the guardrails or any discussion documents on what constitutes an organization that must opt into robust and responsible testing?
Broadly, it's everybody, right? Now, what you'll see is as it becomes more mandatory and more legislative, those thresholds might exist, right? But the reality is we need a set of standards and behaviors that mean that people can't go off and do the wrong thing and knowingly do the wrong thing. Um, when we have a world where we have a lot of public and private data being used together, the watermark has to be significant enough that it is difficult to achieve. But that's the thoughtfulness that we kind of need organizations that are going about it on their own,
Yeah.
or using startups or smaller companies or large tech companies to help them.
Okay. The next one focuses on fair, appropriate, and bias-free data. This is a long-standing topic in data governance and data quality discussions. I mean, it's obviously a huge and complex issue. Can we ever really have bias-free data? And what are some of the steps that developers should be taking to get as close as possible in this new world that we find ourselves?
So I think this has already existed for a while, right? But in isolation, because the data people are using is task level or inside an application ecosystem level, right? So it doesn't necessarily reveal itself as biased in any particular way, right? Or slated in any particular way. I guess as we move forward, the difficulty people will have is firstly, should I have this data? There's a lot of examples where companies have data in their war chest that they should not have held for as long as they do, but they do have. Right? But the biggest one is knowing where your data comes from and how it was collected. Right? So pre-existing, right? Um, but back to that public-private partnerships of data, taking sources external to yourself to kind of enrich your AI program. You also need to know where it came from and how it was collected. Um, and it puts this interesting lens across developers because developers have often taken the data that's been made available to them as the boundaries of everything they did. And they may add other data sources, but more in a interface kind of fashion, right? Not in an enrichment sort of fashion. So developers need to know a little bit more about the limitations of the data sets they have. And if they're using other data sets to enrich that, what are the limitations of that, right? Because what comes through is a couple of things, right? Societal inequities, unrepresented data sets, minorities may not be represented in the data set in the correct way or may be completely void of any data in the data sets. Um, so I guess as we move forward, the idea of this bias-free data is to make sure everybody's honed in on the fact that it's already there with a particular bias. You don't want to solve one problem and create another. So you always have to keep a watchful eye on the fact that as you bring different data sources into your AI pursuits, that genealogy of where it came from, who's using it, how has it been augmented before you've got it. We have to sort of know these things, right?
Yeah. I guess um, this may be one of the challenges of using synthetic data in test sets, for instance.
Yeah, so a lot of organizations take one record and synthesize the rest, or take a lot of data, as a sample and anonymize it and then synthesize on that. But that in itself is just taking forward anything that already pre-existed. Or, if you synthesize to a certain point, you might synthesize out any bias in the real data set that you intend to use. So it's not a representative set of tests you're going to be getting.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to thank Sam and Simon in particular for stepping up and having a chat to us about this really interesting issue. If you want to see more in the series on this, well, there's going to be a little window that pops up at the end of the YouTube video that says next video, and we'll be releasing a few of these over the next few weeks. So heaps of content there for you to catch up on. And if you're listening to this into a podcast, I guess the video thing doesn't really make much sense, but the other episodes will also be available on our podcast channels and our YouTube channel. Again, as I said at the start, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so that you get updates when they come out, and check out our school classroom or the Data Pro newsletter for constant updates and access to some of the world's best industry minds. Alright, until next time, look after yourself, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and I will catch you all on the next one.